It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of America, and live from the WACA studios, this is Good Night. We begin tonight with a story coming from Camp Flog Gnaw, a music festival in Los Angeles, organized by rapper and fashion mogul Tyler, the Creator. The festival lineup was stacked with every member of the pop and rap music sphere, and tickets sold out almost instantly when they went on sale a few months ago. But the hype behind the event skyrocketed even more when it was rumored that mystery final closing guest of the festival would be pop music innovator and Tyler's close friend, Frank Ocean. Ocean doesn't perform live very often, and only a handful of concert appearances since his seminal pop album Blonde back in 2016. So as many fans were excited at the prospect of seeing the elusive musician. But when the time came, it was not Frank Ocean that stepped on stage, but pop and rap phenomenon and the biggest artist in the world right now, Drake. Turns out the rumors were just that, rumors. But that didn't help the fans who were under the impression that they were getting something different. So they did what any unreasonable crowd would do and booed Drake during his set. Reports from the festival do say that there was a lot of uncertainty in how many songs Drake was allowed to play and if he was the final guest for the night. But the final moments of the set, when Drake asks if the crowd wants him to play more and is met with a resounding no, it's pretty painful to watch. It's a strange situation to be sure, but with all the advancements in hologram technology, they could have just brought a hologram of Frank Ocean on stage and kept the crowd at bay. If they can do it with Tupac, they can do it with Frank, I assume. Drake called it a humbling experience, which is certainly a generous way of saying you get what you get and you don't get upset. In the same vein as the hologram Frank Ocean, there's a lot of criticism thrown around when a report surfaced that a new movie was being made with famous Hollywood bad boy, but very much deceased, actor James Dean. The film, a Vietnam movie based on the book titled Finding Jack, will feature Dean as a character named Rogan and will be a full-body CGI character playing a secondary lead role. The visual effects studio responsible for putting James Dean in the movie is the same group responsible for the Spider-Man Far From Home, Jurassic World, and Game of Thrones visual effects. So they're pretty good. But the criticism of recent depictions of CG actors is that something isn't quite right. Whether it's the lips, the way the face moves, we can tell that that person isn't real. Because of this, most movies featuring this kind of technology have put a CG actor front and center. But this is all about to change, for better or worse. It's a pretty scary time for both actors, alive and deceased, if this ends up working, because deceased actors can have their likeness used in films, and living actors just lost a role to a dead guy. Could you imagine getting an email from a casting director saying, "We've searched high and low for the perfect character to portray the role of Rogan, and after months of research, we decided on James Dean"? It would be crazy, right? Almost as crazy as the quote being an actual part of the press release of the film. It's certainly a strange day for the film industry. Catch Academy Award nominee Bruce Dern signing paperwork as we speak, declining anyone to bring him back to life after he dies. In ridiculous news, much has been said about the overwhelming smog and air pollution levels in Delhi, India recently, with most air quality stations putting the danger of the air quality at severe. People are hurting, and the government has done a couple of things to try and mitigate the smog, but it hasn't shown any signs of letting up, so alternative measures may be needed. Have no fear, though, because India's Minister for Health and Family Welfare, among other positions, as well as the Minister of Environmental and Climate Change, put forth some helpful recommendations. In a tweet, one said that if you eat enough carrots, the effect of absurdly polluted air will have no effect on you, specifically citing an increase in vision during the night. In another tweet, the other simply said, "Start your day with music," and gave a recommendation when Delhi chokes to death. Some protests have started to mount criticizing the government's inaction on this public health crisis. And people were especially mad when the government handed out a bunch of adult surgical masks to kids, and none of them fit, making them basically useless. So maybe if you're a public official, try being less tone deaf and don't make dumb tweets about carrots. Thanks. In meme news, Kylie Jenner took to the internet by storm a few weeks ago when a video was shared of her morning routine with her daughter, Stormi. The video shows Kylie waking up her daughter with a meme-worthy melody of Rise and Shine. The internet had a field day with the video, and even we got in on the fun with our own interpretation.
Room now. Rise and shine.
As with anything that family touches, many assume that the phrase would be instantly copyrighted the second it went viral. They were right. By Kylie trademarking it and telling everyone there's going to be merch with the phrase on it, this resulted in a couple of instances of cease and desist letters that were reportedly sent to companies making similar shirts and sweaters. But Jenner denies that this ever happened. She tweeted that there are no lawsuits or C&D letters out. That's for now. That's going to do it for the news this week. Stay tuned for Tom Hamilton's In Case You Missed It segment, and don't go anywhere because we have what's trending on Twitter to discuss, in addition to an interview with A.J. Nichols. So keep it locked right here to Good Night.
Hello and welcome to the 4th episode of In Case You Missed It, a segment where I briefly go over the most popular releases of last week in movies and TV. It was a big week for new movies. The top 4 movies in the box office this weekend were all new releases from this last week. So naturally, I feel obligated to cover them all. I'm your host, the stud muffin Tom Cruise, and let's dive right into movies. Starting with number 1 in the box office this past weekend is Midway. Released on November 8th, Midway features a main cast of Ed Skrein, Patrick Wilson, Woody Harrelson, Luke Evans, and more, but there's not enough time to cover them all. Directed by Roland Emmerich, who you may recognize as the director of Independence Day, Midway is about the Battle of Midway, a decisive naval battle that took place 6 months after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor between the United States and Japan. Midway grossed a worldwide total of $17.5 million, and it wasn't released internationally, so it also opened at $17.5 million, finishing number 1 at the box office this last weekend. Midway received a 41% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics admiring its special effects but criticizing the movie's screenplay, saying that the dialogue is overstuffed with exposition and that there are too many characters. Despite this, I don't think people see this movie for its dialogue. They go to see awesome action sequences and big explosions. There are some movies that rely heavily on plot and others on spectacle, and this is something that I think critics don't get. The special effects and action sequences of Midway are more than enough to make the movie worth watching, despite the plot. Moving on to number 2 in the box office this last weekend, we have Dr. Sleep. Released on November 8th, Dr. Sleep is based off the novel of the same name by Stephen King. Directed by Mike Flanagan, Dr. Sleep features a main cast of Ewan McGregor, who you should recognize as Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Star Wars prequels, Rebecca Ferguson, Kylie Curran, and Cliff Curtis. Dr. Sleep is a sequel to the iconic 1980 film The Shining, set several decades after the events of The Shining. Ewan McGregor plays Dan Torrance, a grown-up version of Danny Torrance, the little boy with psychic powers from The Shining. He's still traumatized by the events of The Shining, but he must now protect a girl with similar powers from a cult known as the True Knot, who want her powers for their own selfish reasons. Dr. Sleep has grossed a worldwide total of $34.1 million, opening to $14.1 million, finishing second in the box office behind Midway. Dr. Sleep received a 75% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics saying that it forsakes the elemental terror of its predecessor for a more contemplative sequel. Mike Flanagan does an excellent job blending Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick's work, since the Shining movie and book had several differences between them. Flanagan was challenged with adapting Dr. Sleep while also staying consistent with the alterations in The Shining. If you're a fan of The Shining, you should absolutely watch Dr. Sleep. Moving on to number 3 in the box office is Playing with Fire. Released on November 8th, Playing with Fire stars WWE star John Cena, Keegan-Michael Key, John Leguizamo, and Brianna Hildebrand. Playing with Fire is a family comedy directed by Andy Fickman, where a crew of elite smoke-jumping firefighters rescue a trio of kids from a fire and are forced to take care of them until they can find their parents. While they are expert at dealing with fires, they find that taking care of 3 kids may be more difficult than putting out fires. Playing with Fire has grossed a worldwide total of $15.3 million, opening to $12.8 million, finishing number 3 in the box office this weekend. The film received a 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is a little too harsh. Sure, the plot is a little formulaic. You have a tough guy who is thrust into a father figure role for estranged and misbehaved children. There are dozens of movies that can fit that description. But those movies keep getting made because people who like those stories enjoy them. So forget the critics. Fans of family-friendly comedies such as this, and parents especially, will love this movie. Moving on to TV shows, on November 3rd, HBO premiered its new fantasy series, His Dark Materials. The show features a main cast of Daphne Keane, who you may recognize as Laura from the movie Logan, Archie Barnes, Kit Connor, and Tyler Howitt. And while that's the top billed cast, I'd feel remiss if I didn't also mention James McAvoy, who you probably recognize from a lot of stuff. His Dark Materials is a show based off an epic trilogy of fantasy novels by Philip Pullman. Now I know what you're thinking. Here we go again with HBO adapting a series of fantasy novels. Well, I have good news for you. Philip Pullman has already finished the trilogy of books the show is based off of, so the show certainly won't have any disasters like the ending of Game of Thrones. The premise of the story is that of an alternative world where all humans have animal companions called daemons. In this world, magic, science, and theology are all intertwined. Lyra, the protagonist, is an orphan who lives with scholars at Jordan College in Oxford. The story begins as she is searching for her missing friend and discovers a sinister mystery. His Dark Materials has a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, with critics praising its visual splendor and exceptional performances, but saying that it could use a little more magic. Personally, I think this show will be fantastic. HBO is usually a slam dunk for TV shows, as their standard for TV shows are almost at their own format, somewhere between the big and little screens. It's already been renewed for a second season, so if you're a fan of epic fantasy stories, you should absolutely give this one a watch. Last but not least, the other TV show I want to cover this week is Back to Life. While it already premiered overseas on April 15th, the show premiered in the United States on Showtime TV on November 10th. Back to Life is a British comedy drama starring Daisy Haggard, Geraldine James, Richard Duran, and Liam Williams. The show follows Mary Madison as she returns to her normal life in the small English coastal town of Hythe, Kent, after serving an 18-year jail sentence for murder. While rebuilding her life, she befriends Billy, a nice man who is taking care of her elderly neighbor next door. The series does a good job of focusing on Miri as she struggles to come to terms with her past while also attempting to rebuild her present, which is made ever more difficult by the fact that the people of her town ostracize her for being a murderer, though her disposition makes it hard to believe she could have done such a thing. The series has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes so far, though with only 19 reviews, so take that with a grain of salt. Ultimately, I find it easy to empathize with the main character because we've all done things that we regret, and sometimes it can be difficult to move on from them even after we've learned lessons from those mistakes. I think this show will give you some thoughts to contemplate in between the laughs it provides, so be sure to check it out on Showtime TV. Before we close out the show, here are some notable returning shows from last week. Rick and Morty, Season 4, Shameless, Season 10, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, Season 4, and Little Things, Season 3. If you're a fan of those shows, they returned last week, so be sure that you don't miss them. That'll do it for this week's segment of In Case You Missed It. Be sure to tune in next week to catch up on all the popular releases of this week. And there should be a lot because Disney Plus is coming out tomorrow. Until then, I'm your host, the Stud Muffin Tom Cruise, and keep it locked. It's a good night.
Welcome back to Good Night. We're joined as always by Stud Muffin Tom, and a new addition to the Trending with Twitter segment, Captain America Chris. There you go. What's going on, guys?
Not much.
Another interesting week on Twitter.
Yeah, as always.
Connor back in the studio. What's the first item they're going to start with? Scoob. I was joking with the guys before we went to film tonight that way too much information file here, but back in the late 70s and early 80s, just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, in Mason, Ohio, I worked at an amusement park known as Kings Island. And I was known to wear a Scooby-Doo costume for many days and traveling around. So I am a Scooby-Doo expert. As you guys know, the Scooby-Doo new animated movie's coming out. What are you guys' thoughts?
Yeah.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
Are
I was
you?
always a big fan of Scooby-Doo growing up.
Yeah. I watched the trailer before I came tonight, and I have mixed feelings. It's like when they redo like anything from your childhood.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
They
Like
could mess it up.
I have very fond memories of like Scooby-Doo always being on Cartoon Network
Yeah.
like every day in the summer, and like those movies being on all the time. So I'm a little bit nervous, but looks okay from the trailer.
The last animated, like the live action Scooby-Doo one,
They were pretty bad.
it wasn't that great, but
No,
as
they
a
were pretty
kid,
bad.
I loved them.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, I mean, you can't really go wrong, I feel like, with Scooby-Doo.
But I was a big Scooby-Doo fan as well, and I thought those movies were horrible. But
Really?
the original Shaggy was the famous American Top 40 DJ, Casey Kasem. So,
He was a DJ.
I didn't know that.
yep, he was. And watching the trailer tonight, I'm like, Shaggy's not the same without Casey
No.
Kasem. But
The voices are really different, even
they're
from
drastically different.
the cartoons that were on when we were younger. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to listen to those voices coming from those faces.
Yeah, I wonder how, because a lot of parents are going to take their kids, so the parents who grew up watching Scooby-Doo are introducing it to their kids. I wonder what their reaction is going to be. It'll probably do very, very well. But
I'm sure.
Yeah.
it'll
Sure it
do
will.
well. I mean, Scooby-Doo's been around since probably the early '70s. So I mean, he's got some
I mean, maybe even before that.
probably the early '70s. Yeah, yep, yeah. But maybe even late '60s. Yeah. But interesting times. So you guys will definitely go see it, or you'll wait to see it?
I'll probably wait until after theaters. I don't think I need
Yeah,
to go
I don't
watch
think-
that in theaters with a bunch of kids.
Yeah, same.
Now, what are your thoughts on animated movies nowadays? Because animated movies, 30 years ago, animated movies were always considered kids' movies, but animated movies are no longer just kids'
I don't
movies.
think that's just a kid's movie. I think they're just as legitimate as live action movies.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. I mean, the technology has come so far that it's amazing. All right, Connor, back in the studio. What's the next item that's trending on Twitter? We talked a little bit about it in pop culture, but Drake, what are you guys' thoughts on Drake? Got booed?
Yeah, he was booed off stage, and I think that's a little messed up, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I definitely understand why fans were upset. Like the whole
Yeah,
like backlog of expecting Frank Ocean, who's like a very different artist than Drake, and then getting Drake at a concert or a music festival that's like not really Drake's crowd.
yeah.
Like a lot of the artists there are like more like counterculture, like subversive. I don't know exactly how to describe them, but like Drake is very pop rap, and a lot of those artists are like the opposite of that. But it's still like
I mean, it's
Drake. It's a
Yeah.
Drake concert.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
what if you just bought a ticket to a Drake concert? How much would that cost? Probably
I
Gotta
don't
say
know off the
hundreds
top
of
my head,
dollars,
yeah.
right?
hundreds. So you got him for free, and people are booing him.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay then.
To me, it felt like the crowd booing Andrew Luck off the football field when he retired. Like, it's just not right.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't
Yeah.
right. No, it wasn't right. But I don't know. Interesting time in the music world. What's the next item trending on Twitter, Connor? National STEM Day. Now, you guys probably went through school when STEM was part of the curriculum, but
Yeah.
it wasn't always the case. What are your thoughts?
I think it should be part of the curriculum.
Yeah, I think STEM's definitely super important. I guess like we kind of grew up taking it for granted that it was like
I mean, yeah, like it was always there for us. Like it never wasn't part of the curriculum for
No.
us. Yeah, so I guess we sort of took it for granted, but definitely important to have.
It was a controversial decision when it was first put into some of the school districts, even like in your guys' hometown. It was a controversial decision because a lot of people didn't understand it. But now, both you guys being male, I mean, some people say that girls have benefited more from the STEM programs than even like boys have because
Really?
it's been a more exposure to a different type of education that people didn't have before,
That's
and it's
true.
opened up doors and opportunities for people. So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing, but.
Yeah.
Now, because you guys were probably the first generation to go through the schools with STEM, was it part of the standardized testing? Were there STEM-like type questions?
The standardized tests we took was the MCAS. And I think that was mostly just math and writing.
Yeah.
I don't think it had...
No science.
No.
I think to me, STEM was just like always part of school. I didn't notice it as like a specific like STEM standardized test. It
Right.
was just like heavy focus on STEM topics in school, and then those were kind of also the things we were being tested on.
What were your thoughts on the standardized testing?
Yeah,
Didn't love standardized tests.
I'm not a fan of it.
No?
No, because I mean, everyone's different. You can't really test everyone
Right.
on the same thing.
Was it stressful?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, yes and no, because we weren't really being graded on stuff like the MCAS. Like, it didn't affect our school grade, but it definitely was a little stressful at the time.
Well, were you guys the generation where if you didn't pass it, you couldn't move on?
It wasn't. No, it was nothing like that. But like, if we did bad on it, like it reflected bad in our teachers
Right.
in the school. So like, our teachers were like really pressing us, like, you have to do well in this.
Or I'm not going to have
Yeah.
a job, yes.
Yeah.
All right, Connor, back in the studio. We've got one last item. What's trending? James Dean. Talked about that again a little bit today in pop culture. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it's pretty excessive to like
Yeah.
completely create a dead
I don't think I like
actor.
it.
Yeah, I really don't.
I don't think I like it.
It's okay for like a side character, but like for like such a front and center role that they would have him be playing, I think that's a little weird.
As we talked about in pop culture, do you guys see the latest Star Wars movie when they had Carrie Fisher in it?
Yep.
She did not look like Carrie Fisher at all.
You don't think so?
No, when she was the young Princess Leia,
Yeah.
I didn't.
Oh,
I
I
didn't
thought it
think
was
so.
pretty similar.
I thought.
Did
yeah,
you? I thought it was
I thought
creepy
it looked
looking.
pretty good.
I,
A little
I-
creepy. You could definitely tell that
See,
it wasn't
and that's, I
real.
think
Yeah.
maybe that was more. I was more creeped out by it than I was like actual look at it. I mean,
So when you saw the movie, did you know beforehand?
I did not.
So
I did not. So when I first
so you
saw
could
it,
tell it looked wrong.
yes, when I first saw it, I knew. So you knew that it was going to happen. Right?
I didn't know that, and I thought when I first saw it, I was like, oh, maybe like they had some unused footage or something
Right.
that they put together.
Well, this new
So
film
it
that's
fools
coming
you.
out right before Christmas time is going to be interesting because
Yeah.
she's going to be featured in it quite a bit, and she's been dead more than 2 years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they make that all work. But you guys familiar with James Dean work? I mean, he was a very famous, iconic actor.
Not really. I mean, I know who James Dean is, but like, I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever seen
I'm pretty much in the same boat.
any of his work.
I mean, do you
Yeah.
think it's interesting that it's going to bring it back to a new generation? People will be talking about it, or are you guys just kind of like whatever?
I think
wait
it's
and
like
see.
it's interesting that the technology has come far enough that they can do this. Like this is affordable for them, I guess. But
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think it's good for the film industry.
Well, you know a lot about technology and film and everything. Is it expensive to do? You think, or is it pretty?
I mean, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I would imagine it's very expensive. To
I
do
would
something
imagine
like
it's
that.
extremely expensive
Yeah.
to do. Yeah, and to make sure it looks right and everything like that.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for another edition of What's Trending on Twitter. We want to thank Chris for taking the opportunity to join us. Hopefully he'll be back again next week. We didn't scare him away. And Tom, as always, guys, thanks. When we come back, we're going to have an interview that I think everybody's going to want to pay attention to. AJ Nichols is here, and we're going to be talking about it right here on Good Night.
I'm feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. I've lost what I was seeking. Sea of problems crashed into you again. I'm an island, keeping out of reach, sinking under me. Don't bother saving me, saving me. lost what I was seeking. I'm feeling so far, from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. Lost what I was seeking. Feeling so far, feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. Lost what I was seeking. Feeling so far, feeling so far from what I'm seeing. Too fast to outrun, ignoring what I've done. Lost what I was seeking.
We're here at Bay Path Humane Society in Hopkinton. We've been around serving this community for about 40 years now, and we care for more than 1,000 dogs and cats each year. We adopt out, we bring in animals locally, we handle strays, surrenders. We also take in dogs in need in overpopulated areas in other states, and we help people rehome their animals as well. Adopting a shelter pet is one of the best things you can do for your community, for the animal, and for yourself. Adopting is a fantastic way to help out animals in need. Not only do you adopt the animal that needs a home, but you also make way for an animal to come in their place, so we can help two animals at once with one adoption. I'm Sandra Gitlin, and I'm a Bay Path board member.
And I am Lizzie Paul. I started off volunteering at Bay Path Humane Society and have most recently started working here as an adoption counsellor and an animal care associate. And this is my lovely dog Arnold, who was my foster success story. So I started fostering him last year and then we ended up adopting him. Bay Path Humane Society are always looking for foster homes for both our cats and our dogs. Our needs range from short-term fostering to long-term fostering. For example, we have litters of puppies that come up that after they have gone through their mandatory 2-day isolation, just need to be put into a home just so that they can recuperate. We also have longer-term dogs that have been here at the shelter for a little while, and it's our aim, if a dog has been at the shelter for over 2 weeks, to try and get them into a foster home. The shelter can be such an overwhelming, loud environment that a lot of dogs can find really stressful. We also have lots of adult cats that are placed into foster homes for behavioural reasons. We have some incredible fosters who really help to bring these cats out of their shells.
If someone can't adopt, we do have lots of volunteer opportunities at Bay Path. For folks 18 and older, you can come in and volunteer. You can also, if you're younger than 18, you can get involved through your school. We have a wish list that you can help do drives off of.
Bay Path Humane Society is an incredible community. We're lucky enough to have a huge bank of volunteers, community outreach programs, and wonderful number of staff as well. We have a social media page, so on Facebook you can find us at Bay Path Humane Society of Hopkinton, and our website address is www.baypathhumane.org.
You look so beautiful.
Thanks, Mom. I'm so nervous.
Oh, sweetie, don't be nervous. You got this. Let me go get you a bouquet.
You look amazing.
Thanks, Dad.
I can't believe you're wearing that old necklace.
You know the rule. Something old, something new.
Shall we?
There are days when you know your life will change. You can look back and see the small moments that make such a difference. Even a single moment can lead to big changes.
I saw it, and I just thought of you.
Thanks, Dad. I love it.
I gotta go to work.
No!
I gotta go, sweetheart. The crew needs all of us to be there so we can all stay safe.
You promise to stay safe out there today, Dad?
What do we say every day?
Every day before work starts,
we talk about staying safe and smart. We wear our safety pants and vests so everyone can see us best. We put out barrels, cones, and signs so drivers stay inside their lines. We work together, no one's alone. That way we make it safely home.
Just an average day. A small moment. But it changed my life.
Welcome back to Good Night. Our next guest is A.J. Nichols, who I got to know through the podcast on Barstool Sports known as The Kirk Minahan Show. Mr. Minahan and I were in Sherborne recently holding a vigil, and we got to talking about ways to help the transgender community. And AJ went on Kirk's podcast just last week and talked about it, and we were so excited about it, we wanted to continue the conversation. So AJ, thanks for coming and joining us here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. So let's talk a little bit about your story and how you got to be where you are. You originally grew up in Bangor, Maine, right?
Yes.
And you're a student at Northeastern.
Yes.
Okay. And you're a transgender.
I am. I'm a transgender woman.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Talk about your story and, you know, how you got to be where you are today.
Of course. So originally, I didn't know when I was growing up. I know a lot of people think that people have to know when they're like 2 or 3 and be really like, this is me, like in full, like wearing your mom's dresses, clothes, everything. But I had a very masculine childhood. I had a twin brother, so I didn't have a lot of resources, you know. And I played sports. I, you know, was always hanging out with the other guys, you know. So I had a very masculine childhood. But the only thing that I knew off the bat was different about me was like that I liked guys. So.
And how early in your life did you realize that?
I must have been 6 or 7. I remember some of my earliest memories are, you know, like having crushes on like TV characters or like, yeah. So, and then when I started growing up through middle school, you know, I kind of watched how men were supposed to act in the world, and I thought, oh, I'm supposed to, you know, have girlfriends, and like if I want to be friends with a girl, it means that I need to ask them out, and like, you know what I mean? But I never actually was like interested in them. I just really wanted to get to know them and be friends with them. So, you know, I think all the girls would kind of figure out after a while that I wasn't like super interested. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they didn't take it personally, because obviously I was working through a lot. But by the time I got to my freshman year of high school, like all those feelings had kind of bubbled up to the surface, and I was like, I'm gay.
Okay. So let's kind of set the table here, because I'm closer to 60 than I am 50.
Okay.
I have kids your age. And I'll say it, back in my day, nobody I knew was as courageous as you, okay? Because I don't think people could be as brave and as candid as you. So I applaud you for that.
Thank
and
you.
it's got to be difficult, but it's also got to be rewarding for you as well. And I grew up in the Midwest, very conservative type guy. Some people say I'm a stunt double for Vice President Pence, which probably Vice President Pence has some issues with it, or probably have some issues with this conversation, but that's his issue to deal with. Like I said, when I was a kid, nobody talked about this subject. But the one thing that really grabbed me from your interview with Kirk, you're a person. And that really stood out to me, and I was really impressed by you, the way you've handled the situation. So understand that I'm a very naive man when it comes to this conversation. Okay. So you were born identified as a male, right?
Yeah.
Is that the proper way of saying it?
Yes.
And please
assigned male at birth.
Assigned male at birth.
Yeah, so like the doctor pulled me out and was like, yep.
Okay.
Throat blue and yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So they wrote down on the birth certificate,
yeah.
Boy, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And you knew early on that you probably were gay, or at least were not interested in the opposite sex, right?
I knew I was at least interested in guys.
Okay.
When I was really young, I didn't do a lot of self-reflection, so I wasn't really concerned with my identity growing up. So my identity was whatever I was interested in. Like when I was really little, I would be like really interested in like growing plants and like teaching my friends about them, or like rocks and like, you know what I mean? So like that, I became like, I was also like accelerated in classes, so I became like the smart kid.
Okay, that's not a bad thing.
You know, that was my identity, and I kind of carried through just like the identity of whatever I was interested in or whatever people saw me as. I wasn't actually looking at the mirror really hard.
Now, I heard you tell Kirk that, you know, your parents kind of knew. It wasn't a surprise to them when you told them that you thought you were gay.
Yeah.
So how did your parents react to that?
To being gay or
Yes.
being trans?
No, because
To
we'll get
being
to
gay?
that. Yeah, to being gay. You
They-
said they kind of knew.
Yeah, it wasn't a surprise to them. I think they had seen me, you know, I think maybe they claim that I've had conversations with them when I was really little, talking about liking guys. I know they probably saw me looking at guys when I was growing up. You know, I was always really interested, you know, just really engrossed with men. So they weren't surprised, and it was honestly very comforting to knowing that I had their support right off the bat, because even coming out as gay is scary. You know,
Oh, sure, I would
lots of
imagine.
gay people. I mean, less now recently, in recent times, which is very good. But you know, 10 years ago, people were getting kicked out left and right.
And when did you, like, what age or like grade did you, you know, finally say, okay, yep, this is what it is, I am gay?
Right before my freshman year of high school.
Right before, so.
15, when I turned 15.
I mean, it's difficult just being a 15-year-old in any capacity with puberty and peer pressure, and now I imagine with social media, it's even more daunting to be 15, no matter who or what, you know, you want. Or so, once again, courageous.
Thank
So
you.
your parents knew. So you went through basically all of high school identifying as a gay person.
Yes.
So how did you go from, and once again, excuse my being naive
No
about
worries.
this, is you were gay, but now you're trans. So walk us through that transition right there.
Of course. So it made sense to me who I liked.
Okay.
You know, when I got into high school, I was interested in having boyfriends. I grew up in a very, very small town. My school was like 500 people. So there weren't a lot of people to talk to because the community is really small. So I didn't really have any in-person relationships. But it made sense in my mind that I liked guys, and I embraced that. I told some friends. I wasn't out. You know, I was still very masculine at this point, so people still thought I was straight unless they really knew me personally.
You were still playing sports and.
Oh yes, I was playing sports.
And did you enjoy that all along, the athletic events, or did you do that just to fit in?
At that point, it was about fitting in, and you know, there's so much pressure to feel like you need to have friends. And I came from a very athletic community, so I felt like I needed to be good at sports to be liked, especially among my friend group. But the more I got into high school, the less and less I felt like I was fitting in with the guys, and obviously I was figuring all these things out. So you know, when I came out as gay to my parents, I was afraid I was going to lose my friends in sports, or that I wouldn't be accepted on like the soccer team because I wouldn't be able to change with, you know what I mean?
Sure,
It got
right.
very scary for me. I got very, very quiet about it.
Now, when people finally found out, how were people kind, or were the typical teenage boys, were they kind of abusive, or was it mixed?
Well, the funny thing is I didn't tell. There were I only really told friends who were girls who
Okay.
knew. I didn't actually come out officially as gay in high school, and it kind of fell under like the whole transition. So, you know, up until my senior year, which is when I officially came out as transgender, people still thought I was a straight guy.
So you actually came out as transgender while you're still in high school?
Yes. So after my first 2 years of high school, like I said, I knew who I liked. That made sense to me, but I was starting to feel like I wasn't seeing myself in the mirror. The more I went through male puberty, you know, it started getting very scary for me, and I didn't know why. I started having a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. I couldn't see pictures of myself, you know, self-harm thoughts, like suicidal thoughts. I was just losing my way, you know.
So who did you talk to?
One of
everybody needs somebody to talk to, and
Oh, yeah.
everybody needs a support group. Your parents, were they supportive and helpful, or was it something you felt comfortable talking to them? Because I would understand at that age you wouldn't be.
I didn't.
I was afraid
yeah.
to tell my mom I had a girlfriend, you know. One, she probably wouldn't believe it, but two, I was, you know, there's just things you don't feel comfortable talking to your parents about, even though they love you and support you. But so who did you talk to? Who helped you through those deals?
I would talk to my good friend Kate, who was like a really good friend to me in high school. She kind of knew. She started to see some signs that I was starting to try to play feminine. I would like draw myself with long hair, and like at one point we were at this conference, and she was like, I think you might be trans. Have you ever thought about that? And I had no exposure to what transgender meant.
So I'm going to show my naive old man syndrome here again. The difference between being gay and being trans is?
The difference is, so there's a difference between gender and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Gender is who you are, who you see in the mirror.
Okay.
Sexuality is who you go to bed with.
That's a very good, yeah, okay.
So for me, I knew who I wanted to go to bed with, but I didn't love myself. And I was like, I didn't see myself in the mirror.
Well, see, I think that was the thing that stood out to me the most when you did the podcast with Kirk.
Okay.
Is I could hear, and you just said it right now, you didn't love yourself. And that, to me, is the concerning part. That, why didn't you love yourself? Because your body was rejecting who they were? Your mind thought you should be somebody else? What is it? Because I believe everybody should be happy. You know?
It's like, it's scary.
Take your time. I mean, you're doing great.
The further I got into male puberty, my voice was deepening, and it was scaring me because I didn't know why, and it didn't feel like it was, my mind was like, no, it should be higher. Why is it going deeper? You know, I developed a really bad stutter, and I stopped wanting to talk to people. You know, I was, by my middle of my freshman year, I was like, I had a really bad stutter. At the same time, like, I was very muscular and bulky before I started transitioning, so I was growing a lot from playing sports, and the bigger like my chest and biceps got, the less I wanted people to see me, so I started wearing sweatshirts and jackets every day to school, like to cover those parts of my body. And like the metaphor that I like to use to describe gender dysphoria, which is that condition, the medical condition, where your mind doesn't match with what your body's doing, is called gender dysphoria. I like saying it's like you're wearing like 8 sweatshirts, but you can't take them off, so you just feel like tight and strangled all the time. It's the muscle. Like my brain was rejecting the muscle, all the muscle growth, and you know, the facial hair, everything. So, yeah.
So, to look at you now, sit there and say, that's a pretty girl.
Thank you.
How did you go from being a muscular jock guy to where you are now?
So what happened was, once Caitlyn Jenner came out in 2015, I started doing a lot of research and realizing that this was also my story. I talked to my parents and let them know what was going on. They were very surprised. They also didn't have a lot of exposure to anything about the trans community, so they were really afraid. Afraid for my medical well-being, because there's a lot of surgeries. Back a couple years ago, everything was still kind of experimental. My brother was, I told him before my parents, and he was really concerned about my health if I was going to go through all these surgeries.
And how many surgeries have you had?
So I've had 1 so far.
Okay.
Once my parents got on board, I started getting into counseling, and I went through basically a whole year of being I'm trying to think of the right word, so I was talking to a therapist, and they were like, okay, we can see that you have gender dysphoria, you know, you're being persistent, insistent, and consistent about that you need to live as a woman. I was saying that I dream of myself every night being like a woman and beautiful, and that's how I want people to see me, and it kills me that I can't show that to people.
Now, is that part of you just can't walk in and say you want to change your gender. There is a process, and there's counseling, and there's...
Yeah, in most places there still is some kind of, like, part of the protocol is going in and getting letters signed from social workers or licensed therapists saying that you do have gender dysphoria, also from your primary care provider, before you actually go on to getting medical, like, prescriptions for transition hormones.
Okay. So you've had the one surgery.
Yes.
And are you on any medication now or anything that people need to know about?
Yes. So once I had the year of, like, counseling, if you will, we got connected with Trans Youth Equality Foundation.
Which we're going to talk a little bit about.
Yes. And they basically, Susan Mosh, who's the founder, basically kind of reinforced in my parents' brains that this is a medical issue. You know, it's like someone with heart failure, like, sitting in therapy talking about how much it hurts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but not actually doing anything to treat it. So at this point, like, my mental health was rapidly decreasing. I was sabotaging my body, gaining a ton of weight, thinking about self-harm. So at that...
Now, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Talking about self-harm. In what
Yeah.
way? You contemplated suicide?
Yes.
Multiple times?
Yes.
And you were that depressed?
Yes.
And limited people you could talk to about it, right?
Yeah, no one knew.
No one knew. So that was hell. That was hell.
Yeah, I didn't see the point in waking up and living as someone who I wasn't anymore.
And you really thought you were at battle with your own body.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel now?
Amazing.
Do you really?
Yes.
No regrets?
No regrets.
No regrets.
I don't. One of the things that people, a misconception about transitioning is that it's a choice. For me, it wasn't. The choice was to live, you know, because I don't think I'd be here if I didn't get the medical help I needed.
Really? So they actually saved your life, you think?
Yeah.
Wow. And how old are you? I know you're never supposed to ask a young lady how old you are.
I'm
but
21.
21. So you went to high school when you were 14 or so?
Yeah.
So it's been
just
about a
turned 15.
7-year, can I use the word struggle?
Yes. Yeah. So from my freshman year, so 6-7 years. So from my freshman year when I started figuring out my sexuality through when I officially started hormones and everything, which is estrogen. Spironolactone is the testosterone blocker, which stopped my body from growing muscle, stopped it from facial hair, stopped it from producing, you know, all of those male secondary sex characteristics. And then I introduced estrogen, which basically it helps reduce my muscle mass. It does fat redistribution. So previously I carried a lot of weight in my upper body that shifted down to my hips. I had breast growth. It helped with my hair growing out. You know, it gave me it made my face like round and happy. And then.
Now, do you have to take that for life?
Yes.
For the rest of your life?
Yeah, my body doesn't naturally produce estrogen.
Right.
But after I started taking those hormones, like a year or two in, I had an orchiectomy, which is castration, so that my body wouldn't be able to produce testosterone anymore. So now I was able to get off the spironolactone, and now it's just the estrogen that I take every day, and that's all that my body runs on.
Is that a pill? Is it an injection?
Yeah, it's
a
like
pill?
oral pills. Yeah.
And twice a day, 3 times a day? Or?
Once a day.
Once a day.
In the morning, I just dissolve them on my way to work in my mouth.
So you want to get into fashion in your life, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's going to be interesting. I mean, what's your passions?
So around that time when I was really struggling in high school, I started getting really passionate about clothing design. I asked my grandmother, who was a seamstress a long time ago, how to sew, and she got me started hand sewing. She taught me how to use a sewing machine, and she taught me how to use patterns and start to make clothes. And that was so fascinating to me because part of the reason was I didn't feel like I could control what I looked like as a person, but I felt like with fashion and my clothing, I could kind of add layers that helped me express myself. You know, so I really, really wanted to make clothes that I couldn't find in stores that we know would represent me. So
And there's a need for that.
Absolutely. So like unisex clothing, it's not designed to, in terms of style and size, or size somewhat, but more like style. It's not designed to be for men or women specifically. It's meant to cover a broad range of sizes, but also have styles that can kind of be worn by anyone, regardless of your gender expression.
Well, I think that's great. I think that's great.
I'm actually wearing a piece I made today.
It's a beautiful piece. Very nice.
Thank you.
So you go back home to Maine, right? And you run into somebody you went to high school with. Do they recognize you? No. Is that uncomfortable?
Yeah. I was working at a job this summer where there was someone who I played soccer with back when I was in early high school, and had no idea who I was. I was a different person.
And you just kind of played along, or?
I played along because
But you know what? That's okay, because like every once in a blue moon, I'll get somebody from high school that'll like send me something on Facebook, and
yeah,
I haven't talked to you in 30 years. There's a reason. So like, don't worry about it. I mean, your high school life will fade away, just like everybody else's.
Absolutely.
Everybody else's. Maybe you're lucky you keep one or two good friends from high school, but so you're on to your new life, and you're happy.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the most
Yeah.
important part.
It absolutely changed my life.
Okay. So everybody who's known you at Northeastern has known you now. And is it fair to say that, and once again, I'm very naive and I'll be the first,
It's okay.
you're a female now?
Yes.
So everybody that you've known at Northeastern has always known you as AJ, a female?
Yes.
Okay.
So by the time I got to Northeastern, I had been medically taking hormones for almost a year. So by that point, the physical changes in my hair growing out had caused so much change that I was unrecognizable from where I was like my junior year. So, and in a sense that like people just saw me as a woman. So I showed up and I introduced
that's what you
myself
are.
as AJ, yeah.
And that's great.
Thank you.
So Kirk Minahan has pledged $10,000 donation
Yes.
to be matched by Barstool Sports, another $10,000 donation. He's also challenged one of his adversaries, a well-known activist, to a round-table discussion. I've actually reached out to the Globe as well, the Boston Globe, to increase the awareness for this. So potentially, we could be talking about a sizable donation to your foundation, the foundation that you're with, and I want to make sure I get this right, the Trans Youth Equality Foundation.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
So the Trans Youth Equality Foundation was, you know, it kind of became a second family for me when I was really struggling, when I was still living in Maine, when I was just starting to, you know, my parents were on board with everything. We were doing research. I knew like maybe one or two other people who were transgender in my town, and they were both not medically taking hormones or transitioning or changing their names with the school at that point, or, you know, I didn't know anyone who was going through that full process.
Mm-hmm.
So through one of my counselors, I was recommended to them where they have a weekend retreat where you can go and meet all these other kids who are going through the same thing that you are. And I hadn't started transitioning at that point. So when I got there, I was just amazed to see, you know, how amazing these kids' lives were now, because they had gotten the help they needed. They looked amazing. They looked like they should always look. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
How you see yourself inside, like it was on the outside for them, you know?
So a $30,000 donation, how many lives are we talking about here? I mean, if we can save one life, that's important, but $30,000 donation would change multiple lives, right?
Yeah, because one of the things that they do is if kids can't afford to go, they give scholarships, you know, and that could be the difference between a kid making friends and having that support system and getting connected with resources that will help them medically transition, and, you know, counselors, therapy, like everything, like even just the support group within Trans Youth. It's life-changing.
So what do you still do to help the community? Do you go back and counsel, and
I do.
You're available?
I do, yes. So I did 2 camps on my own as a camper. then I aged out when I turned 19 and I went to college. And I really wanted to give back because my life had changed so much since they helped me. And it was because of them and my parents that I was able to keep living and do as well as I was able to. So this past summer, they asked me to come back as a camp counselor. And I got to go back and meet with all these kids who honestly were terrified. They were looking ahead at these steps that I went through, and they were like, how did you do it? Like, how do I do it? How do I get my parents on board? How do I get the support I need? You know, and I got to make these amazing relationships with them. Really just be that friend, that big sister they need.
I think that's, and where's the foundation based out of?
So right now it's based out of Portland. The founder lives in Bangor, so they kind of go back and forth. But they have people everywhere who are always helping.
Because we'll tweet out and we'll tag it to this. But I think this is an important thing, and we have to increase the awareness of this issue because
Thank you.
The fact that I hear that you were in so much pain, and now I hear that you're happy, that's all that matters.
Thank
that's
you.
all that matters. You've got to be one of the bravest people I've ever met. I think you've got to be commended. I also got to give a shout out to your parents because I'm sure that the times were tough, but I think you've got some great parents. And
the statistics of having supportive family members drastically improves it reduces suicide rates. It gives you the support system. It gives people that feeling of connection.
Good. So to wrap it up, because we never have enough time here, what more can people do? What more can people learn? And your closing thoughts.
Definitely. Please check out Trans Youth Equality Foundation on their Facebook page, on their website. You can learn more about how you can help. You can make donations on your own. And please just, I hope my story helps people understand that this, trans kids are really vulnerable and they need people's support in the schools, in the workforce. It's so crucial that we're supported and, that people are there for us.
Well, I got to tell you, like I said, you're one of the bravest people, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Anything we can do to help you, I think we've got to keep promoting this. And Kirk's adversary needs to step up a little bit to the table a little bit. And
I'd love to have a conversation with him.
And you've offered to moderate that conversation.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's make it happen. All right.
Thank you so much.
This is AJ Nichols. Very impressive young lady.
Thank you.
And we'll be back right here on Good Night.
Hi everybody, I'm Jack Hanna. Since I was a boy growing up on a farm in Tennessee, I've been fascinated with animals. I'm not only in awe of their beauty and kindness, but also their tireless work ethic. Just look at the birds who gather supplies to build nests, or Swiss foxes who work hard to provide for their young, or penguins who travel up to 500 miles to secure food for their families, or bush babies whose impressive jump allows them to navigate the trees in the wild in search of fruit. This remarkable work ethic is shared by our best friends, the canines. We know dogs are wonderful pets at home, but because of their acute senses, they also perform life-saving work every day. Dogs keep us safe at airports. They comfort returning veterans, some of whom suffer from PTS. They work with diabetics, alerting them when there's a change in their blood chemistry. Working dogs have a variety of highly trained roles that contribute to society and help those in need. So please join me and American Humane in supporting our heroic working dogs and all the amazing animals on this planet we inhabit together. Go to AmericanHumane.org to learn more.
Mother Teresa once said, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your family." Because changing the world starts with changing yourself and working outward from there. We're in Rotary because we want to take action in our communities and around the world. But to change the world, we have to start at home by making the changes we need in our organization to ensure that we will remain both relevant and vibrant for many years to come. To serve our communities well, we need to represent our communities in terms of age, gender, ethnicity, and background. We need to start reaching out to people who might not know about Rotary or might not understand what Rotary membership entails. To do that effectively, we need to work on strengthening our public image through our presence on social media and by holding Rotary Days, free, outward-facing community events that showcase who we are and what we do. Let's show the world how we are people of action. We also need to start working much harder to bring Rotaract closer to Rotary. Today we have 250,000 Rotaractors in about 10,000 clubs. 27% of Rotary clubs have sponsored a Rotaract club. I want to see those numbers double with new Rotaract clubs that are community-based. And I want the natural path out of Rotaract to lead into a Rotary club bringing in the diversity, the energy, and the new ideas that Rotary needs. Work together. Have service projects together. Sponsor a new club if you haven't done it yet. Treat Rotaractors as younger colleagues, not as interns. And show them everything that Rotary has to offer. The opportunities that have shaped each of us in Rotary and helped all of us to be the inspiration.
Thanks for tuning in to Good Night. We'll be back next Monday at 9 p.m. live on YouTube. Also, thanks to Tom Hamilton for his In Case You Missed It segment, and Chris for showing up to Trending Tonight. And be sure to check out the Trans Youth Equality Foundation, and have a great night.
We're clear. Like a pro.